Good day, folks, and welcome to review number 28. Today we're going to delve back into the world of Busou Shinki and look at a bit of a classic figure here. Today we're going to look at the type Siren Eukrante. Eukrante is a little bit older Busou Shinki figure, and she's been out for a few years. I purchased this one secondhand off of Counterpunch from the Sabertron.com boards. So yes, I can now officially say that I have been counterpunched too, but I want to give him a special thank you for giving me a pretty good deal on it. Going back to the packaging, we'll start off with the front here. The front features a large artwork image of Ukrante in one of her battle poses. And as I mentioned in the last Busou Shinki video, the older MMS1 packaging had this fold-open packaging where you have images of the toy in various poses on the inside of the flap, and then the package opens up to reveal the clear window showing the figure inside. The back of the packaging features, again, the same artwork that we saw on the front at the top, and then across the middle is an advertisement for Battle Rondo. Battle Rondo was the web-based video game that the Busou Shinki line was based off of. When you bought the figures, there's a card inside with a code that you could go to the website, register your character, and then you could play that character in the game. Now, unfortunately, Battle Rondo is no longer active. There are a couple PSP games that are out there now featuring the Busou Shinkis, but Battle Rondo itself is no more. The left side of the packaging features artwork of Eukrante using her armor in a vehicle configuration. And then on the right side you have yet another configuration for her armor mode. So here we have Eukrante's figure, and they did a good job with the paint jobs here. I've always loved purple and black together, so I'm particularly fond of the color scheme. But it's a pretty typical MMS1 style body, which I'll show you the differences in a little bit. But in particular, I'm really fond of the colors on this figure. Really, the most distinguishing feature of any Busou Shinki is the head sculpt, and I think they did a great job with this one here. In particular, I like what they did with the hairpiece here. I also have the Yaida figure, and the little piece of hair that sticks out up here, she has the same thing, except hers is detachable. And unfortunately, it disappeared on my other figure. This piece, they actually molded it into the larger headpiece, so it's not something that you have to worry about losing. But at the same time, you do have to be careful with it so it doesn't break off. But I would prefer to be a little bit more careful with my figure rather than worry about losing pieces. Now, as I stated earlier, Eukrante is an MMS1 type figure, and we will compare that now to a similar MMS Type 3 figure here, just to point out a few of the major differences here. A couple changes that I particularly like with the newer body. The older body had many of these spacers here in between the arms and leg attachments. They have eliminated those in most cases in the MMS3 bodies. The other major difference that I particularly prefer with the MMS3, the older style chest plates basically just used kind of a friction joint to hold them on. There's a little clip on the underside and then a friction point at the neck to hold these plates onto the chest. This can create a problem, as over time that friction will wear down and you won't have a friction point anymore, and the chest pieces just tend to fall off. The MMS3 actually uses kind of a harness piece, really. It fits over the neck and shoulders and it is not going to fall off by any means. It has a couple clips on the bottom side just to make them a little tighter, but it's not something you have to worry about falling off and losing. There's some other minor differences with how the different body parts attach, but those are the two main differences that I've noticed and that were a big improvement as far as I'm concerned with the MMS3. Of course, the other hallmark of the Busou Shinki line is the customizable armor. And of course, you get lots of little parts. Although, being the MMS1 style, there aren't as many parts as you see in the more recent Busou Shinki figures. It's kind of a plus and kind of a minus. I do like simpler armor in a lot of cases, but it is nice to have all of those parts to give you all of the different options that we saw in the Star Mark II figure, but there's still quite a bit of customizability here. Of course, it does come with an instruction sheet, so if you don't feel creative enough to come up with your own armor configurations, they've got several suggestions in here, and like a model kit, some basic instructions on how to assemble them. But the great part is, if you don't like the way they look in here, you can come up with your own modes.
As with all Busou Shinki figures, half the fun is assembling the figure's armor. Eukrante uses the same system of pegs to hold her armor together as other MMS1 figures. As an aside, the MMS3 figures use a slightly different configuration for the attaching back piece, so in most cases you won't be able to use the armor from an MMS1 figure on an MMS3 body, or vice versa. Many of the pegs, however, are the same size, so you can use individual pieces of the armor interchangeably to customize your figure. Now, being a type Siren, Ukrante's armor takes its cues from the ancient Greek depictions of sirens, being half woman, half bird. The wings in particular have multiple sections, giving the appearance of feathers. In fact, there's even a mode for her armor where the figure is separate and the armor becomes a large mecha bird. Unfortunately, though, the bird mode is more of a parts former than a real transforming robot, which is a little disappointing for die-hard Transformers fans like myself. Now back to the armored figure. With Ukrante being an MMS1 style figure, the armor is a little simpler than newer Busou Shinki figures, and you can quickly assemble her armor in just a couple minutes. Assembly is also fairly intuitive, as you can easily discern where parts should go. I say should again because part of the fun of having a Busou Shinki figure is coming up with your own take on the armor.
So here we have Eukrante armored up, and I really like this look. Again, I'm a sucker for the mecha style angel look. So despite being MMS type Siren, she still has that winged look to her, which I really like, which is why I'm a fan of Arnval, which is type angel, and Altrine, which is type Valkyrie. They all have this winged look to them, which I really think that looks sharp here. And here's kind of a progression of these winged figures in the Busou Shinki line. You have Arnval on the left over here, who she was in the very first wave release of the Busou Shinki line, and as such was definitely a much simpler figure. Then you move to Eukrante in the center, which was a later MMS1 figure, and you can kind of see the progression, the improved armor, the more complexity of the armor, the more detailed paint apps, and then finally the latest winged figure I've purchased, the Altrine figure, which is an MMS3 style body, which is much more complex, many more pieces, and about an equivalent paint job. So there's a little bit of winged figure history progression with the Busou Shinki line.
Ukrante is a great figure and a great addition to any Busou Shinki collection. With the reissue that occurred earlier this year, you may have better luck tracking her down now than you would have, say, a year ago. If you're interested, I would say go for it now, because Busou Shinki figures only get harder to find the longer you wait. I'm glad that I picked up Eukrante, and hope to find some of the other MMS1 figures as they get reissued.